as a disclaimer, I'm not going to talk about this as a therapist. I am going to give some signs and symptoms and some things to do, but I'm doing this more as kind of like you would share your, your recovery story, because I don't want anyone thinking that you can diagnose yourself from what I'm saying, because you can't. But I am going to give you some signs and symptoms, and then some things to do about it. But I'm also going to share a little bit about my own discovery of having ADD, because I think that's important. Because I was diagnosed, I was trying to figure out this morning, probably 27 years ago, and I would have never been diagnosed, I don't think, had my youngest daughter was teaching school and starting a year in Fort Worth teaching school, and they had an in-service training on ADHD and ADD, and a doctor that actually had written a book came to do the seminars, the way I understand it. I'm the one that has always historically bought books for people to read, particularly people in my family. You might want to read this. So I went up there to see her room, and it was like the day after this seminar, and Christy said, "Mother, she was telling me about the man coming, and she said, would you be willing to read this book? And it's called Driven to Distraction." And I thought she meant for my profession. Nope, she was wanting me to read this so I could identify myself. Well, I read this book, and I read myself on every page. And what I realized, that I had never really been appropriately diagnosed through the years. And so I read the book. I went to my primary care physician, and without knowing, I didn't know anything very little about ADD, nothing about adult deficit disorder, and very little about ADHD. We didn't back then. We didn't. I mean, there's more information out now. But anyway, I went to my primary care physician, and I took the book, and I said, my daughter thinks I have ADD, and I've read the book, and I think I do. And she said, and I've seen her for quite a few years, and she said, I have always suspected that you had it, but I didn't want to diagnose you because you have learned to live and work with your symptoms. And my concern was, if I gave you the diagnosis, you might go backwards. And come to find out, she was the ADH doctor in Abilene. She was far ahead of most of the physicians here, and so she really guided me towards some things, basic things to do, and I did everything. I'm a good student, and I'll tell you, I can live with ADD today, and it is not a curse. It is and it's not a disease. It's biology. It's about brain chemistry. It's a neurological syndrome in the brain. You either have it or you don't have it. You don't just wake up one morning and think, I've got ADD. No, you either have it or you don't. Now, the classic defining triad of ADD is distractibility, like there goes a chicken. Right now I can look out here and see that. It's the distractibility, and it's also hyperactivity. Now, the hyperactivity doesn't show up very often in adults. It does some, but how it will show up is that restlessness on the inside. And so sometimes it can be that misdiagnosed as anxiety and depression, and you may have anxiety, depression, and ADD. We don't know. but a good clinician, a good doctor, a good someone that specializes in ADD can give you a clear diagnosis. Don't just go down in the phone book and pick a doc and go see them. You've got to get with people who understand this syndrome. So it has, and when we have that hyperactivity, now, children with ADHD, it usually manifests itself with hyperactivity. In our adult life, we can be very active and it not be real hyper, but the restlessness, the hyperness, a lot of times is on the inside. So, and also, it can manifest itself as daydreaming. Now, this is where a lot of children get misdiagnosed. With having, that they're not diagnosed with having ADHD. I believe today that I had ADHD as a child, but mine didn't manifest itself as being hyperactive. There was a kid in my third grade class named Douglas, and we didn't know anything about ADHD, but he had it. I mean, he'd be climbing out the windows, he'd do everything, climbing on top of the teacher's desk. But I was a daydreamer. Now, a lot of your ADHD kids will be daydreamers, and adults will be daydreamers. Like, I'd be sitting in class looking out the window, and I'd be in San Francisco, or my imagination would go wild. And, so it can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. And one of the things this is why you really need to get a good diagnosis, because what happens is when you have ADD, and I will tell you this in a few minutes in the signs and symptoms, and I love saying this because people with ADD usually are highly intelligent. We are some very intelligent people. But we have too many interests. We'll go here and here and here and here in 1 minute, So a lot of it is learning how to focus, because ADD people have a hard time focusing. So with that kind of intro, but this book, Driven to Distraction, I guess it's still in print, I don't know. But they had, about the time, right after I was in Fort Worth, it was later on in the fall, Abilene had brought this man to Abilene, and there was probably 1,000 people at the Civic Center. I didn't know that many people was interested in ADD, but they were about 1,000 people, and he spoke, but he spoke from the heart, because he was a physician and had suffered from ADD all his life, and was renowned in his field, but he never felt like he had achieved anything. He had never really gotten there. Now, that's what ADD people do. I don't care how much we succeed, how much success we have, we never feel like we have really gotten there. We've never, won the prize. We've never completed the task. So with that, it's Edward Hollowell. I would really encourage you to, you got it there, I see. Yes, good. Yeah, I've looked at other books. This is more thorough. And what he stresses in his talk, and what he stresses is use some humor with yourself. And all through this book, he uses humor in the book. And it just helps us not take ourselves quite so serious. Yeah, we have to take the disorder or the syndrome serious and treat it, but kind of get off our own back. So anyway, briefly, I want to go over what I'm reading is just, and I'm not putting all of them down, but these are some signs and symptoms, and I go check, 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 see if any of these ring a bell to any of you. So adult ADD typically marked by inattention and hyperfocus, often internalized or restlessness, emotional deregulation, and excessive mind wandering. Our mind wanders. Okay, so number one, difficulty in following directions or reading directions. Directions? What are directions? Anyway, ADD people have a little problem following directions. Number 2, completing tasks in a timely manner. Now, what I would do, and I still do, is I can do several things at the same time. And if I keep circling long enough, I'll get them all done. But it's about, and I have to really focus today on what I'm doing. And really, and that is really how you treat ADD, is you learn to focus and bring yourself back to the focus. Right now, I'm wanting to get into a whole lot of other stuff instead of focusing on what I have written down. So I am showing you, I'm demonstrating to you what ADD actually is, and I dropped my book. So here we go. All right. All right, so it's, and I don't like this number 3. I hope Kim is not listening. I do not like number 3, chronic lateness. Now I'll tell you, I have worked on that, and I am good. I am much better about being late, but chronic lateness. And so what that has made, majority of my children, like I have a dozen, but anyway, I have 4, they are hyper vigilant about being on time. I always hear Kim saying, if she's on time, she's late. And she, made a decision in childhood, I'm not going to be late because my mother's late to everything. All right, number 4, and I don't like this one either. Chronic procrastination or trouble getting started. One of the first 4 steps I did after coming back from treatment, I did a 4-step, and I did a 5th step with my sponsor, and I encouraged her. I said, well, why don't you write down my character defects? I can be so manipulative. And she said, no, I'd rather not do that. You tell me what you think they are. No, you tell me. Anyway, she wrote down one word, and what that one word was procrastination. And I got angry because she thought I procrastinated. I do. I don't as much. No, these are things I have had to diligently work on for the last 27 years. Okay, and intolerance of boredom. An ADD person seldom feels boredom. I mean, I can understand people being bored. We can't tolerate, an ADD person usually cannot stand to be bored. Now, I can, if I want to, and I have had to learn to do this. I wouldn't take a nap. I don't care what. Today, I can. But I've had to work on these symptoms. I'm kind of laughing and making it light, but I was pretty severe with ADD. And the diagnosis that I had before this was narcolepsy. And I went years being treated for narcolepsy. And after I got this diagnosis and started treating the symptoms, I didn't have anybody's narcolepsy. It's just so interesting. So anyway, then this boredom thing, because what happens when we feel bored, we get into another project. I've always been pretty much a project person. Now, I wore my kids completely out, particularly the ones who work for me, because they would just be on one project and I would think of another one and then another one, or I would go out of town and I'd get to thinking. That was my problem. I'd get to thinking of what else we could do, and I'd call back. They hated those calls because I'd say, okay, now we can do this, we can do that. If you do that, that's ADD. And I will tell you, by the grace of God, I do not do that anymore that I know of, but I'm sure they'll let me know if I do. Okay, so number 6, easily distracted, trouble focusing on the here and now. Number 7, ADD people are often, you're going to find these folks are very creative, they're intuitive, they're almost mind readers. Make good therapists. They are highly intelligent, and they're idea people. So that's not a bad symptom, to have. It's being able to work with that, to work within that. And 8 is trouble going through the proper channels. We think that you know, when you want to do something, I mean, don't go, I'm much better than I've ever been. I want you to get that. But before, if I wanted to do something, you know, I wouldn't take the proper channels. I'd go to the top. I'd go to begin at the top person. And I mean, I just cut out all of that in between stuff. Just go to the top. And sometimes that works real well. But anyway, ADD people have a hard time of going through channels and, you know, cutting through all of the red tape, all of that. So, uh, so because going through the red tape and taking time and all of that, ADD people get very frustrated and they want it done now. Now, right now. Any of y'all can identify with any of this, or am I the only one here? All right. And this is just a follow up on what I've been saying. Number 9 is impatient. My dad used to say, "You're the most impatient child that I have ever seen." I mean, if I heard it once, I heard it 4,500 times. You're impatient, low frustration, and gets angry if things don't happen quick enough, fast enough. I've worked on that a lot. I've worked on all these, and I'm going to tell you how I've worked on them. And then number 10 is impulsive. I won't go into what it was, but I made a very impulsive decision. I mean, it's not anything connected with my business. It's a personal thing. I made a very impulsive decision. And then 2 days later, I'm changing my mind. So I'm not completely well, folks. And I can change my mind. But, you know, sometimes I usually, and this was part of the recovery, is to check out before I would act. Check it out with someone. Check it out with another person. You know, at least one other person. So that impulsive, verbally or in action, and then action is in spending money, changing your plans, changing careers. You know, it's always in that changing mode, going from this to that to something else. Number 11 is tendency to worry needlessly, endlessly. To worry becomes what attention turns into when it isn't focused on some task. So ADD people, if we're not, you know, because we're task people, if we're not focusing on a task, then a lot of times ADD people will get in way into the future and worry and worry and worry and stress about things that haven't even happened, may not ever happen, but it takes up space in the brain. So, number 12, ADD people a lot of times have a sense of insecurity. Many adults feel like that this world would collapse around them, is going to collapse around them. There's a lot of insecurity with ADD people. And all this may not fit you, or none of it may fit you. It's that henny penny syndrome. The sky is falling, you know, somebody do something, you know, that fear, that insecurity of what's going to happen. And then 13 is ADD people can have mood swings. They can go from being in a good mood to swinging all the way over to the other side and being in a bad mood in a short period of time. It can be hours or it can be minutes, just that pendulum swinging back and forth. And it confuses the hell out of people that you're around, you know, and it's hard to work with, you know, well, how's she going to be now, you know? So anyway, and sometimes those bad moods won't last very long, but they make a big impact on people if you're not careful. So I spoke a little earlier about the hyperactivity in adults ADD, the hyper part is a lot of times not manifested on the outside, but it's manifested on the inside is restlessness, that nervous energy, not being able to sit still, always thinking about the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. It's hard to relax and just be. 15, tendency, isn't this amazing? The tendency toward addictive behavior, drugs, alcohol, gambling, shopping, eating, overwork. It's why we see a lot of our addicts come in that have already been diagnosed with ADD. When they come in, we don't diagnose them with ADD, they bring the diagnosis with them, and they usually bring the medication with them. They've already been diagnosed with ADD, and that they have, when they come to see us, is this addictive behavior. They're into an eating disorder, they're into alcoholism, drug addiction, anything to ease that pain and slow them down where they can breathe and focus. And then 16 is chronic problems with low self-esteem. Before diagnosis, for most people with ADD, before the diagnosis, they might have done a lot of good things in their life, but they never feel like they've got it right, that they've done it right. They never feel like they have really completed the task, run the race, got the award. They just never feel like that they're getting it right. And I see that with ADD people that we treat here, and that chronic low self-esteem. And then 17 is inadequate self-observation. A lot of times ADD people have no idea the impact they have on other people, particularly their families, their employers, or their employees. People with ADD kind of live in their own little bubble, and they have no idea. It's much like addiction, that we have no idea that what we're doing is affecting someone else. And usually that's how you doctors know to get to diagnose someone with ADD. Talk to the family, talk to the boss, talk to people around you, And you may think that, that behavior that you have is you just are that get or done type of person, and that you can just do a lot of things at the same time, and da-da-da, and da-da-da, and you look around and you're wearing your family out, or your employees out, or your employer will give you a task and you'll start on it, and then you'll look over there and think, well, I need to be doing this, and you'll leave this task and go over there to do something you wouldn't even ask to do. That's how that brain, that biology of the brain does. It just do like ping pong. Now see, right now I had an ADD thought. Ping pong. I was at the country club for lunch yesterday, and the tennis pro said the number one sport in America today. Y'all know what the number one sport in America is today? What is it?
Pickleball.
Pickleball. Have y'all heard of pickleball? The number one sport in America today. Now that's how my ADD works. I was talking about this, the ping pong, then I thought of pickleball. So that's how it works. And I could go into all that, and then I'd forget. All right, I'm not completely well, y'all, but I'm aware of it. That's the difference. All right, so with a clinician, or a psychiatrist or a psychologist or whoever, or medical doctor that understands ADD, they will probably want to talk to the family, because that's really a real diagnostic tool, is to talk to the family, because they observe things that we are clueless that we're doing. It becomes a way of life for us, and we don't know how what we're doing is affecting another person. And then we wonder, a lot of us are overachievers or overworkers. We will overwork and sometimes not accomplish a whole lot, or we don't think we've accomplished a lot. And here we're wearing out everybody around us. They're trying to keep up with us, and we don't think we've accomplished enough. So the family and employers and employees can really give a lot of insight on how an ADD person shows up in their life. Because ADD people see themselves as less effective and less powerful than most people see them. You can rise up the head of, you can do a lot of good things and be maybe head of your profession or really doing well, but you never think that you have achieved it. You never think that you have achieved enough. ADD people do. So also number 18 is majority of ADD people, there's a family history of ADD. Now remember, we haven't had this diagnosis forever. But think back about your parents, your grandparents. Sometimes it's like addiction. It can run in families. And not all, but a majority of your ADD people that have been diagnosed in adult life, you look back, maybe you were, many was diagnosed in childhood as ADHD. Not all, but majority. I was never diagnosed, but in looking at the signs and symptoms in childhood, like I reported, my main symptom was the daydreaming. And that is that getting out. And I think a lot of that, I want to say this, it can be from growing up in dysfunctional home and alcoholism and all that, but that's not what ADD is. It is not about, how much problems you had with your mother or how much this or that. Those are, can be real separate problems. They can be problems, but that's not ADD. You have ADD because it's a biological brain syndrome. Now, you may have trouble with your mother, and you may have trouble with, society, you may have other problems. But you can't, like, for instance, we do a 4-day intensive. If you have ADD and you haven't been diagnosed, and you come in here and you do the work around your childhood, when you leave here, you're going to still have ADD. It's a separate thing. All right. I'm beating that to death, aren't I? Okay, so let's talk about what we can do to manage it. And I've done this, and it works, folks. It really does. It's really the first thing, and I cannot express this enough, get a clear diagnosis from a professional. And, you can go to highly credentialed professionals, but if they don't understand ADD and have studied it, you won't get a good diagnosis. What you can come out, what they have to exclude is related similar conditions like anxiety and depression, OCD, hyperthyroid, manic depressive. So those things can look like ADD. Are you getting me? So you've got to go to a good clinician that can rule out all of those things and come up with a clear diagnosis of ADD. 2, educate yourself. The most powerful treatment for ADD is understanding ADD in the first place. Read every book you can get your hands on. Educate yourself about it, because a lot of professionals don't know about it. You go, and I am not down in professional doctors, but doctors are trained. You go in, you report the symptom, and they write out a script. So get with doctors who understand ADD. I've said that 14 times. Read the books. Talk with other adults who have ADD. And then there is a national organization, and there are local, in many towns, local organizations, support groups for ADD. And so avail yourself to that. Because it's like any problem, it's really like addiction. It's that identification. If you can talk to someone that is in the process of learning how to use their brain, in spite of the ADD. You can, one thing, it'll help you realize that you're not nuts, that you're not crazy, that you haven't made it up, that you do have a diagnosis. But get with other people that are in the process of recovering and working on it every day. So another thing, and this is one of the things that helped me so much, and keep in mind, this was in the early days, 27 years ago. And what the doctor said is find a coach to help you. Now, there was a woman here, and there's usually, someone that has a personal interest in some subject that gets the ball rolling. And how this doctor, Dr. Hollowell, how he was invited to come to Abilene was because of this one woman. Her husband had ADD, all of her children had ADHD. She was looking for answers. And so through her, I found a coach. And I worked with that coach. It's not a sponsor. Now you could, maybe I would say don't use a sponsor, don't use your spouse. Get someone that understands ADD and that is in the process of recovering themselves. And what a coach does is they'll hold you accountable. I have been a list maker all my life, but I couldn't do my list because I would add more on my list than I could ever accomplish. And she would have me focused on every morning, we started out with 3 things. And I'd say, but I have nope, you're going to do 3 things. I still do 3 things a day, regardless of what else I want to do. I accomplished 3 things. And it started with her coaching me on you pick 3 things and you get them done, and then we'll look at the rest of the list. And I talked to her, started out every morning for 5 days a week. And then I did that all total. I worked with her probably for 6 months. And then periodically I would call her back through the years. But find someone also that's not a taskmaster. Find someone that has some humor. You're gonna have to use some humor in working with your own ADD process and with other people. Find some humor in it because it is humorous. It is because you can be having a conversation with someone and all of a sudden be distracted. And you're not listening to that person. You are thinking about that bird out there in that tree, or how bad that yard is horrible. I need to get out there and work the yard. And they don't even know you've left the room, And so that's why it's hard to have relationships early on with ADD people until they get into recovery, until you understand as family members what the syndrome is. And so choose a coach, but choose someone that has some humor that can help you, look at yourself and not get so down on yourself. And number 4, seek encouragement. Be around people who will encourage you in your growth in ADD, because ADD, and I've never known, anyway, this came right out of the book. ADD adults need lots of encouragement. We need encouragement. And because without encouragement, we don't thrive very well. We don't thrive very well with our own encouragement because our brain gets kicked in and it tells us, you can't do that, you're not going to succeed, and you're like the addict brain. But the ADD brain is a downer. It really does tell you bad things about yourself. So ADD people thrive on encouragement. It's not false encouragement or compliments.